Did you know how much the Wild West most wanted outlaws were worth? Some bounties were higher than the price of an entire ranch. But what did it really mean to have a price on your head? And who had the biggest bounty of them all? Let's break it down. Billy the Kid. The $500 outlaw Billy the Kid was one of the most notorious outlaws in the West. But his bounty wasn't as high as you might think. The reward for his capture was set at $500. A small fortune back then, but only around $15,000 in today's money. So why was his price so low compared to others? Well, Billy was famous, but he wasn't seen as a large-scale criminal. He was more of a young gunslinger caught in the Lincoln County War, a range conflict in New Mexico. His legend grew after he supposedly killed 21 men, one for each year of his life. But historians believe the real number was closer to 9. Sheriff Pat Garrett eventually took him down in 1881, but not before Billy escaped from jail, killing 2 deputies in the process. And here's the crazy part. Some people believe Billy survived and lived under a different name for years, Jesse James. The $5,000 legend, Jesse James, was in a league of his own. His bounty was set at $5,000, which would be worth over $150,000 today. That made him one of the most valuable targets for bounty hunters. Jesse started as a Confederate guerrilla fighter during the Civil War, but after the war, he and his gang turned to robbing banks and trains. Unlike Billy the Kid, Jesse had a reputation for large-scale heists, and he became a folk hero. Some saw him as a Robin Hood figure, even though there's little evidence he actually gave money to the poor. The James Younger gang terrorized the Midwest for over a decade, and law enforcement struggled to catch them. But in the end, Jesse wasn't taken down by a sheriff or a bounty hunter. He was betrayed by one of his own men, Robert Ford, who shot him in the back of the head in 1882, hoping to collect the reward money. John Wesley Hardin. The $4,000 deadly gunman, John Wesley Hardin, wasn't just a gunfighter. He was a killer with a deadly reputation. He claimed to have killed over 40 men, though the real number was probably closer to 27. His bounty? $4,000, which would be worth over $120,000 today. Unlike Billy or Jesse, Hardin didn't have a gang. He was more of a lone wolf, constantly on the run from the law. He once killed a man just because his snoring was too loud, and he even shot a sheriff who tried to arrest him. But his luck ran out when Texas Rangers finally caught him in 1877. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison, but was released after serving 16. He tried to go straight, becoming a lawyer, but old habits die hard. In 1895, he was shot and killed in El Paso, ironically not by lawmen, but in a personal dispute. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. The $20,000 outlaws Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid were different from the others on this list. They weren't just ruthless gunmen, they were professional thieves, masterminds behind one of the most successful outlaw gangs in history, the Wild Bunch. Their bounty? A staggering $20,000, enough to buy a huge ranch in Texas. That was an enormous amount at the time, showing how desperate lawmen were to bring them down. The Wild Bunch specialized in robbing banks and trains, but they did it with style. They avoided unnecessary violence, preferring to outthink the law rather than outgun them. When things got too dangerous in the U.S., Butch and Sundance fled to South America, where they continued their outlaw life. But in 1908, they were reportedly killed in Bolivia after a shootout with the Bolivian army. However, some believe they faked their deaths and escaped. Why were these bounties so high? In the Wild West, law enforcement was weak, and many towns didn't have the manpower to track down criminals. Bounties became a way to encourage bounty hunters, essentially legal assassins, to bring in outlaws, dead or alive. But were these bounties fair? In some cases, they were used as propaganda to make criminals seem more dangerous than they really were. In others, the rewards weren't enough, because many bounty hunters spent months chasing their targets, often risking their own lives. Final question. Were these bounties fair, or just a way to lure bounty hunters into dangerous situations? And if you had to choose one outlaw to chase, which one would it be? Let me know in the comments.